Sweat by Zora Neale Hurston. It was 11 o'clock of a spring night in Florida. It was Sunday. Any other night, Delilah Jones would have been in bed for 2 hours by this time. But she was a washwoman, and Monday morning meant a great deal to her. So she collected the soiled clothes on Saturday when she returned the clean things. Sunday night after church, she sorted them and put the white things to soak. It saved her almost a half-day's start. A great hamper in the bedroom held the clothes that she brought home. It was so much neater than a number of bundles lying around. She squatted on the kitchen floor beside the great pile of clothes, sorting them into small heaps according to color, and humming a song in a mournful key, but wondering through it all where Sykes, her husband, had gone with her horse and buckard. Just then, something long, round, limp, and black fell upon her shoulders and slithered to the floor beside her. A great terror took hold of her. It softened her knees and dried her mouth so that it was a full minute before she could cry out or move. Then she saw that it was the big bullwhip her husband liked to carry when he drove. She lifted her eyes to the door and saw him standing there bent over with laughter at her fright. She screamed at him. "Sykes, why you throw that whip on me like that? You know it would scare me. Looks just like a snake, and you knows how scared I is of snakes." "Course I knowed it. That's how come I done it." He slapped his leg with his hand and almost rolled on the ground in his mirth. "If you such a big fool that you had to have a fit over an earthworm or a string, I don't care how bad I scare you." "You ain't got no business doing it. God knows it's a sin. Someday I'm going to drop dead from some of your foolishness. Another thing, where you been with my rig? I feeds that pony. He ain't for you to be driving with no bullwhip." "You sure is one aggravating nigger woman," he declared, and stepped into the room. She resumed her work and did not answer him at once. "I done told you time and time again to keep them white folks' clothes out of this house." He picked up the whip and glared down at her. Delilah went on with her work. She went on into the yard and returned with the galvanized tub and set it on the waste bench. She saw that Sykes had kicked all of the clothes together again and now stood in her way reluctantly, his whole manner hoping, praying for an argument. But she walked calmly around him and commenced to resort the things. "Next time, I'm going to kick 'em outdoors," he threatened as he struck a match along the leg of his corduroy breeches. Delilah never looked up from her work, and her thin, stooped shoulders sagged further. "I ain't for no fuss tonight, Sykes. I just come from taking sacrament at the church." He snorted scornfully. "Yeah, you just come from the church house on a Sunday night, but here you going to work on them clothes. You ain't nothing but a hypocrite. One of them amen corner Christians. Sing, whoop, and shout, then come home and wash white folks' clothes on the Sabbath." He stepped roughly upon the whitest pile of things, kicking them helter-skelter across the room. His wife gave a little scream of dismay and quickly gathered them together again. "Sykes, you quit grinding dirt into these clothes. How can I get through by Saturday if I don't start on Sunday?" "I don't care if you never get through. Anyhow, I done promised God and a couple more other men I ain't going to have it in my house. Don't give me no lip neither, else I'll throw 'em out and put my fist upside your head to boot." Delilah's habitual meekness seemed to slip from her shoulders like a blown scarf. She was on her feet, her poor little body, her bare knuckly hands, bravely defying the strapping hulk before her. "Looky here, Sykes, you done gone too far. I've been married to you for 15 years, and I've been taking in washing for 15 years. Sweat, 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 work and sweat, cry and sweat, pray and sweat. What's that got to do with me?" he asked brutally. "What's it got to do with you, Sykes? My tub of suds has filled your belly with victuals more times than your hands has filled it. My sweat is done paid for this house, and I reckon I can keep on sweating in it. She seized the iron skillet from the stove and struck a defensive pose, which acted surprised at him greatly coming from her. It cowed him, and he did not strike her as he usually did. "Nah, you won't," she panted. "That old snaggle-toothed black woman you running with ain't come here to pile up on my sweatin' blood. You ain't paid for nothing on this place, and I'm going to stay right here till I'm toted out 4 foot most." "Well, you better quit getting me riled up, else they'll be toting you out sooner than you expect. I'm so tired of you, I don't know what to do. God, I hate so skinny women." A little awed by this new Delilah, he sidled out the door and slammed the back gate after him. He did not say where he had gone, but she knew too well. She knew very well that he could not return until nearly daybreak also. Her work over, she went to the bed, but not to sleep at once. Things had come to a pretty pass. She lay awake, gazing upon the debris that cluttered their matrimonial trail. Not an image left standing along the way. Anything like flowers had long ago been drowned in the salty stream that she had been pressed from her heart. Her tears, her sweat, her blood. She had brought love to the union, and he had brought a longing after the flesh. 2 months after the wedding, he had given her the first brutal beating. She had the memory of his numerous trips to Orlando with all of his wages when he had returned to her penniless, even before the first year had passed. She was young and soft then, but now she thought of her knotty muscled limbs and harsh knuckly hands, and drew herself up into an unhappy little ball in the middle of the big feather bed. Too late now to hope for love. Even if it were not Bertha, it would be someone else. The case differed from the others only in that she was bolder than the others. Too late for everything except her little home. She had built it for her old days and planted one by one trees and flowers there. It was lovely to her, lovely. Somehow, before she came, she found herself saying aloud, "Oh well, whatever goes the devil's back has got to come under his belly. Sometime or other, Sykes, like everybody else, is going to reap his sowing." After that, she was able to build a spiritual earthworks against her husband. His shells could no longer reach her. Amen. She went to sleep and slept until he announced his presence in bed by kicking her feet and rudely snatching the covers away. "Give me some cover here. Ain't get your damn foots over on your own side. I ought to smash you in your mouth for drawing that skillet on me." Delilah went to clear to the rail without answering him, a triumphant indifference to all that he was or did. The week was as full of work for Delilah as all other weeks, and Saturday found her behind her little pony, collecting and delivering clothes. It was a hot, hot day near the end of July. The village men on Joe Clark's porch even chewed cane listlessly. They did not hurl the cane's knots as usual. They let them dribble over the edge of the porch. Even conversation had collapsed under the heat. "Here come Delilah Jones," Jim Merchant said, as the shaggy pony came round the bend of the road toward them. The rusty buckboard was heaped with baskets of crisp, clean laundry. "Yep," Joe Lindsay agreed. "Hot or cold, rain or shine, just as regular as the week's rolling round. Delilah carries 'em and fetches 'em on Saturday." "She better if she want to eat," said Moss. "Sykes Jones ain't what the shot and powder he would take to kill 'em. No, not to her he ain't." "He sure ain't," Walter Thomas chimed in. "It's too bad, too, 'cause she was a right pretty little trick when he got her. I'd have married her myself if he hadn't have beat me to it." Delilah nodded briefly at the men as she drove past. "Too much knocking will ruin any woman. He done beat her enough to kill 3 women, let alone change their looks," said Elijah Mosley. "How Syke can stomach that big black greasy mogul he layin' around with gets me. I swear that 8 Rock couldn't kiss a sardine can or done throwed out the back the way last year. Oh, she's fat, that's how come. He always been crazy about fat women," put in Merchant. He'd have been tied up with one long ago if could have found one to have him. Did I tell you about him come sailing around my wife, bringing her a basket of pecans out of his yard for a present? Yeah, my wife. She told him take 'em right straight back home 'cause Delilah worked so hard over that wash tub she reckoned everything on that place tastes like sweat and soap suds. And just wished I had caught him around here. I'd have made his hips catch on fire down that shell road. I know he done it too. I sees him grinning at every woman that passes, Walter Thomas said. But even so, he used to eat some mighty big hunts of humble pie to get that little old woman he got. She was as pretty as a speckled pup. That was 15 years ago. He used to be so scared of losing her. She could make him do some parts of a husband's duty. They never was the same in the mind. There ought to be a law about him, said Lindsay. He ain't fit to carry guts to a bear. Clark spoke for the first time. "'Tain't no law on earth that can make a man be decent if it ain't in him. There's plenty of men that takes a wife like they do a joint of sugar cane. It's round, juicy, and sweet when they gets it. But they squeeze and grind, and wring till they wring every drop of pleasure that's in 'em out. When they satisfied that they is wrung dry, they treats 'em just like they do the cane chew. They throws 'em away. They knows what they is doing while they is in it, and hates theyselves for it, but they keeps on hanging on after her till she's empty. Then they hates her for being a cane chew and in the way. We ought to take Sykes and that stray woman of his down in Lake Howell Swamp and lay on the rawhide till they can't say Lord of mercy. He always was a overbearing nigger, but since that white woman from up north done teached him how to run an automobile, he done got too biggity to live, and we ought to kill him. Old man Anderson advised. A grunt of approval went around the porch, but the heat was melting their civic virtue, and Elijah Mosley began to bait Joe Clark. "Come on, Joe. Get a melon out there and slice it up for your customers. We all suffering with the heat. The bears done got me." "That's right, Joe. A watermelon is just what it needs to cure the epidemic." Walter Thomas joined forces with Mosley. "Come on there, Joe. We all is steady customers, and you ain't set us up in a long time." "I chooses that long," bow-leggedy Florida favorite. "Ah, God, and be dough. You all give me 20 cents and slice away," Clark retorted. "I needs a cold slice myself. Here, everybody chip in. I'll lend you my meat knife." The money was quickly subscribed and the huge melon brought forth. At that moment, Sykes and Bertha arrived. A determined silence fell on the porch, and the melon was put away again. Merchant snapped down the blade of his jackknife and moved toward the store door. "Come on in, Joe, and give me a slab of sow belly and a pound of coffee. Almost forgot 'twas Saturday. Got to get on home." Most of the men left also. Just then, Delilah drove past on her way home, as Sykes was ordering magnificently for Bertha. It pleased him for Delilah to see. "Get whatsoever your heart desires, honey." "Wait a minute, Joe. Give her 2 bottles of strawberry soda water, a quart of parched ground peas, and a block of chewing gum." With all this, they left the store, with Sykes reminding Bertha that this was his town, and she could have it if she wanted it. The men returned soon after they left and held their watermelon feast. "Where did Syke Jones get that woman from nohow?" Lindsay asked. "Over Apopka. Guess they must have been cleaning out the town when she left. She don't look like a thing but a huck of liver with a hair on it." "Well, she sure can squall," Dave Carter contributed, "when she gets ready." To laugh, she just opens her mouth and latches it back to the last notch. No old Grandpa Alligator down in Lake Bell ain't got nothing on her. Bertha had been in town 3 months now. Sykes was still paying her room rent at Della Lewis, the only house in town that would have taken her in. Sykes took her frequently to Winter Park to stomps. He still assured her that he was the swellest man in the state. "Sure you can have that little old house soon as I can get that woman out of there. Everything belongs to me, and you sure can have it. I sure abominates a skinny woman. Lordy, you sure is got one portly shape on you. You can get anything you wants. This is my town, and you sure can have it." Delilah's work-worn knees crawled over the earth in Jemethasane and up the rocks of Calvary many, many times during these months. She avoided the villagers and meeting places in her efforts to be blind and deaf, but Bertha nullified this to a degree by coming to Delilah's house to call Sykes out to her at the gate. Delilah and Sykes fought all the time now, with no peaceful interludes. They slept and ate in silence. 2 or 3 times Delilah had attempted a timid friendliness, but she was repulsed each time. It was plain that the breaches must remain agape. The sun had burned July to August. The heat streamed down like a million hot arrows, smiting all things living upon the earth. Grass withered, leaves browned, snakes went blind and shedding, and men and dogs went mad. Dog days. Delilah came home one day and found Sykes there before her. She wondered, but started to go on into the house without speaking. Even though he was standing in the kitchen door, and she must either stoop up under his arm or ask him to move, he made no room for her. She noticed the soapbox outside beside the steps, but paid no particular attention to it, knowing that he must have brought it there. As she was stooping to pass under his outstretched arm, he suddenly pushed her backward, laughingly. "Look in the box there, Delilah. I done bring you something." She nearly fell upon the box in her stumbling, and when she saw what it held, she all but fainted outright. Sight, my God! You take that rattlesnake away from here. You gotta. Oh, Jesus have mercy. Ain't got to do nothing. Other kin facts is, I ain't got to do nothing but die. 'Tain't no use of you putting on airs making out like you scared of that snake. He's going to stay right here till he die. He wouldn't bite me 'cause I knows how to handle him. Nohow, he wouldn't risk breaking out his fangs on your skinny legs. No, now, Sight, don't keep that thing round here to scare me to death. You knows I'm scared. I fear the earthworms. That's the biggest snake I ever did see. Kill him, Sight, please. Don't ask me to do nothing for you, going around trying to be so damn asperious. Nah, I ain't gonna kill it. I think a damn sight more him than you. That's a nice snake, and if anybody don't like him, can just hit the grit. The village soon heard that Sykes had the snake and came to see and ask questions. How the hen fire did you catch that 6-foot rattler, Sykes? Thomas asked. He's full of frogs, so he can't hardly move. That's how. I eased up on him. But I'm a snake charmer. I knows how to handle 'em. Shucks, that ain't nothing. I could catch one every day if I wanted to. What he needs is a heavy hickory club leaned real heavy on his head. That's the best way to charm a rattlesnake. Nah, Walt, you just don't understand these diamondbacks like I do, said Sykes in a superior tone of voice. The village agreed with Walter, but the snake stayed on. His box remained by the kitchen door with a screen wire covering. 2 or 3 days later, it had digested its meal of frogs and literally came to life. It rattled at every movement in the kitchen or the yard. One day, as Delilah came down the kitchen steps, she saw its chalky white fangs, curved like scimitars, hung in the wire meshes. This time, she did not run away with averted eyes as usual. She stood for a long time in the doorway, in a red fury that grew bloodier for every second that she regarded the creature that was her torment. That night, she broached the subject as soon as Sykes sat down to the table. "Syke, I want you to take that snake away from here. You done starved me, and I put up with you. You done beat me, and I took that, but you done killed all my insides bringing that varmint here." Sykes poured out a saucer full of coffee and drank it deliberately before he answered her. "A whole lot I care about how you feels inside or out. That snake ain't going no damn where till I gets ready for him to go. So far as beating is concerned, you ain't took near all that you got to take her if you stay round me." Delilah pushed back her plate and got up from the table. "I hate you, Sykes," she said calmly. "I hate you to the same degree I used to love you. And then took till my belly is full and to my neck. That's the reason I got my letter from the church and moved my membership to Woodbridge, so I don't have to take no sacrament with you. And don't want to see you round me at all. Lay round with that woman all you wants to, but go away from me in my house. I hate you like a sucked egg dog." Sykes almost let the huge wad of cornbread and collard greens he was chewing fall out of his mouth in amazement. He had a hard time whipping himself up into a proper fury to address Delilah. "Well, I'm glad to see that you hates me. I'm sure tired of you hanging on to me. I don't want you. Look at your stringy old neck. Your raw bony legs and arms is enough to cut a man to death. You looks just like the devil's doll baby to me. You can't hate me no worse than I hates you. I've been hating you for years. Your old black hide don't look like nothing to me but a passel of wrinkled up rubber with your big old ears flapping on each side like pair of buzzard wings. Don't think I'm going to be run away from my house neither. I'm going to the white folks about you, my young man, the very next time you lay your hands on me. My cup is done run over." Delilah said this with no signs of fear, and Sykes departed from the house, threatening her, but made not the slightest move to carry out of any of them. That night he did not return at all, and the next day, being Sunday, Delilah was glad she did not have to quarrel before she hitched up her pony and drove the 4 miles to Woodbridge. She stayed the night to the night service, Love Feast, which was very warm and full of spirit. In the emotional winds, her domestic trials were borne far and wide, so that she sang as she drove homeward. "Jordan water black and cold, chills the body, not the soul. And I want to cross Jordan in a calm time." She came from the barn to the kitchen door and stopped. "What's the matter, old Satan? You ain't kicking up your racket?" She addressed the snake's box. Complete silence. She went on into the house with a new hope in its birth struggles. Perhaps her threat to go with the white folks had frightened Sykes. Perhaps he was sorry. 15 years of misery and suppression had brought Delilah to this place, where she would hope anything that looked towards a way over or through her wall of inhibitions. She felt in the match safe behind the stove at once for a match. There was only one there. "Dat nigger wouldn't fetch nothing here to save his rotten neck, but he can run through what I brought quick enough. Now he done told it off nigh onto her a box of matches. He done had that woman in my house, too." Nobody but a woman could tell how she knew this, even before she struck the match, but she did, and it put her into a new fury. Presently, she brought in the tubs to put the white things to soak. This time she decided she need not bring the hamper out of the bedroom. She would go in there and do the sorting. She picked up the pot-bellied lamp and went in. The room was small, and the hamper stood by the foots of the white iron bed. She could sit and reach through the bedpost, resting as she worked. "I want to cross Jordan in a calm time." She was singing again. The mood of the love feast had returned. She threw back the lid of the basket almost gaily. Then, moved by both horror and terror, she sprung back toward the door. There lay the snake in the basket. He moved sluggishly at first, but even as she turned round and round, jumped up and down in an insanity of fear, he began to stir vigorously. She saw him pouring his awful beauty from the basket upon the bed. Then she seized the lamp and ran as fast as she could to the kitchen. The wind from the open door blew out the light, and the darkness added to the terror. She sped to the darkness of the yard, slamming the door after her, before she thought to set down the lamp. She did not feel safe even on the ground, so she climbed up in the hay barn. There for an hour or more she lay sprawled upon the hay, a gibbering wreck. Finally she grew quiet, and after that, coherent thought. With this, stalked through her a cold, bloody rage. Hours of this. A period of introspection, a space of retrospection, then a mixture of both. Out of this an awful calm. Well, I done the best I could. If things ain't right, God knows 'tain't my fault. She went to sleep, a twitch sleep, and woke up to a faint gray sky. There was a loud, hollow sound below. She peered out. Sykes was at the woodpile, demolishing a wire-covered box. He hurried to the kitchen door, but hung outside there some minutes before he entered, and stood some minutes more inside before he closed it after him. The gray in the sky was spreading. Delilah descended without fear now, and crouched beneath the low bedroom window. The drawn shades shut out the dawn, shut in the night, but the thin walls held back no sound. That old scratch is woke now, she mused at the tremendous whir inside, which every woodsman knows is one of the sound's illusions. The rattler is a ventriloquist, his whir sound to the right, to the left, straight ahead, behind, close underfoot, everywhere but where it is. Woe to him who guesses wrong, unless it is prepared to hold up his end of the argument. Sometime he strikes without rattling at all. Inside, Sykes heard nothing until he knocked a pot lid off the stove while trying to reach the match safe in the dark. He had emptied his pockets at Bertha's. The snake seemed to wake up under the stove, and Sykes made a quick leap into the bedroom. In spite of the gin he had, his head was clearing now. "My God," he chattered, "if I could stack up a light." The rattling ceased for a moment as he stood paralyzed. He waited. It seemed the snake waited also. "Oh, for the light. I thought he'd be too sick," Sykes was muttering to himself when the whir began again. Closer, right underfoot this time. Long before this, Sykes' ability to think had been flattened down to primitive instinct, and he leaped onto the bed. Outside, Delilah heard a cry that might have come from a maddened chimpanzee, a stricken gorilla. All the terror, all the horror, all the rage that man could possibly express without a recognizable human sound. A tremendous stir inside there, another series of animal screams, the intermittent whir of the reptile. The shade torn violently down from the window, letting in the red dawn. A huge brown hand seizing the window stick. Great dull blows upon the wooden floor, punctuating the gibberish of sound long after the rattle of the snake had abruptly subsided. All this Delilah could see and hear from her place beneath the window, and it made her ill. She crept over to the 4 o'clocks and stretched herself out on the cool earth to recover. She lay there. "Delilah, Delilah," she could hear Sykes calling in a most despairing tone, as one who expected no answer. The sun crept on up, and he called. Delilah could not move. Her legs were gone flabby. She never moved. He called, and the sun kept rising. "My God," she heard him moan. "My God from heaven," she heard him stumbling around, and got up from her flower bed. The sun was growing warm as she approached the door. She heard him call out hopefully, "Delilah, is that you here?" She saw him on his hands and knees. As soon as she reached the door, he crept an inch or two toward her, all that he was able, and she saw his horribly swollen neck and its one open eye shining with hope. A surge of pity, too strong to support, bore her away from that eye that could not fail to see the tubs. He could see the lamp. Orlando with its doctors was too far. She could scarcely reach the chinaberry tree, where she waited in the growing heat while inside. She knew the cold river was creeping up, and up to extinguish that eye, which must by now know that she knew.